Ibby.
All right.
Ibs.
Yes.
Ibrahim. What?
Yeah.
What the heck happened today? Who did we talk to and about what?
So yeah, we had Sarah Payne, who leads AI strategy, centered around ethics, and she gave a really, really good intro for herself. And I will read off her LinkedIn really quick because she does a lot of really cool stuff at Coinbase. So she's the AI strategy and program lead, focusing on, so basically, like, you know, companies like Coinbase are implementing AI across their workflows, and she's kind of the person that is in charge of understanding and focusing on how that development goes. So she talked to us quite a lot about like how she thinks about responsible AI, how she thinks about, for example, like developing a chatbot. How do you make sure that a chatbot says things that are both relevant and safe and ethically sound, and she is in charge of thinking about how the frameworks are to implement that across the rest of the Coinbase business. I thought it was a great conversation. Sean, anything to add there?
Yeah, I thought I would kind of group the conversation into two core topics, right? And so I think the first is sort of ethics and responsibility and setting things up with guardrails to make sure that AI doesn't go crazy and you treat your customers and lean into trust and kind of the core things we always talk about, even when we're not talking about AI stuff, when we talk about just customer experience in general and how important it is to solve problems correctly and promptly and build trust and have these great experiences. That doesn't change when you offload it to AI. Like, you still need to have all those things. And so how do you build that in? And then the second thing we talked about was a bit more in this sort of the strategy behind construction, right? And so talking about data availability, talking about timeliness, talking about humans in the loop, and how do you build a system, validate it over time, and slowly remove the human control or human involvement.
Yeah, and to be clear, there's definitely still a place for humans to be in there, but if you're trying to like have a model take over a workflow, how do you not just give it access to everything day one?
Right. Yeah, certainly it wasn't. We did not touch on the idea of eliminating people from the company. We talked about eliminating them from certain functions or processes so that they can indeed explicitly focus on the things that matter most, that we can have the most impact on.
Exactly. I could not have said it better myself. It was a great episode, and everyone enjoy.
I'm Ibby Syed.
I'm Sean Collins.
And this is Numbers and Narratives.
Yeah, we did that and we ran.
I was like ready.
And wait, can you guys not see the countdown clock?
We can, but you didn't hit it yet. So you said that. She started going, then the countdown clock came on. So she didn't know that there was even a countdown clock.
Whoops, that's my B. All right. Well, starting off strong. Thank you guys so much for coming on. Sarah, thank you so much for being our guest today. Before we jump in, you want to introduce yourself quickly to the audience?
Yeah. So my name is Sarah Payne. I'm a technical program manager focused on AI strategy and automation at Coinbase. And my work really sits at the intersection of model intelligence, business logic, and user experience. And I really care deeply about how we design systems that don't just work well, but work ethically for the users that are interacting with them.
That's a really succinct introduction. Appreciate that a ton.
I wish we could get like the what is Cotera response to be that succinct, because that was great.
I mean, to be fair, I'm using ChatGPT Delight.
You're just like, are you just like on the side, just like typing in, who am I? What do I do?
No, I had like a little pocket guide. I had it create me just so like if I get stuck or anything, because like this normally comes very fluidly, but it's been a while, so I'm like, I was a little nervous last night. I was like, let me just have something ready.
I love that.
I love that a ton. Wow. Like that actually flew really naturally off the cuff. Usually when people prepare, like it just does not, like they like just sound super canned, but I love that a ton. Look, like we can flow right into it, right? Like you and I had a really good chat a couple of weeks ago about responsibility and safety in AI. It sounds like that's like something that you're doing. Do you want to like, I think it might be interesting to kind of talk about some of the verticals that you like, some of the verticals around AI safety, right? Like there's obviously a ton of language around, giving AI access to sensitive data, bias. What kind of verticals do you think about when you're thinking about it at Coinbase, or just in general?
Well, I think this might be so I know in startups, there's a lot of stuff that's being built from the ground up. But when you're working in an organization, like a CX organization within Coinbase, like we're coming from the perspective of like we've had a logic tree branched based chatbot that we're now turning into a truly like autonomous like agent. And so you have to think more, and these things probably should have been thought about from the beginning, and not to say that we weren't, but um I think it really brings into light even more like what are your automations doing that are harmful and preventing your users from doing? Because everything you put out into the wild as an automation is affecting someone. Even if it doesn't show up in a metric, someone is impacted by that. So really trying to keep a pulse on like what our metrics aren't saying. Because we can get data from metrics, but like where are the hidden pockets of like where someone is not being able to get to like a human agent because of something that was like poorly designed in the system.
Yeah, it is interesting to, when you think about like architecting out the kind of quote unquote unhappy path, it becomes so complex when it's like, because so many of the edge cases are things you can't even, like, you would never even think of. Like I remember
Yeah.
at a previous company, we had issues with like texts being filtered out if they were from a non-US number. And so people would like try and like chat in because they moved abroad, and then they like the text was being filtered out in weird ways. And it's just interesting to think about like that. It's like the absence of a data point somehow has to set off alarm bells.
Yeah. 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 That's a really good point. Because, like, LLMs, they kind of, you can get at guardrails, but if you are missing a specific instruction on telling it what not to do or what to do, that leaves a gap on what it might want to do, and how that affects someone. And like, how do you catch that? Because sometimes those things, like, I'm not quite sure if you can out the gate have mechanisms to catch everything at once. You have to have a human in the loop to be reviewing and looking for like anomalies. And then eventually you'll have enough data to have the LLM do it for you. But um, it's a tricky thing when you're trying to scale and move quick because I mean everyone does right now. It's a race, not just for the startup space, but even business to business and optimizing and being more efficient.
I think there's a couple interesting tidbits to pull on there. One is like, how do you bootstrap that safety? Because like if you're trying to design guardrails, in engineering, I'll be boring for a second. There's this thing called like a spec suite, right? Like before you design a system, you design sort of all the tests that the system has to pass, right? Like if you're going to design a computer program that takes a lowercase, that takes like a name and then capitalizes it, you have to write a test case that says Sarah, like that's like Sarah with SARAH with the lowercase s, and the expectation is that it's capital SARAH and not like all caps, just the first letter, right? And you design kind of that suite, and then you design your like code around it. That's really hard when it comes to LLMs because they're what's called like non-declarative, right? Like you can put two things in, and that's funny. You can put something in, and you can get two different things each time. And so how do you design guardrails and expectations? And one of the things that I've seen people start to do, and we've started doing this, is like run the same prompt like 2 or 3 times and check to make sure, like the way that you figure out what the flag to a human is if you train 3 models, one on, OpenAI, one on Claude, one on Gemini, and you have it respond to a user's query. And if the responses aren't the same, it flags it, and it's like, hey, like this is something that's like probably messed up. This is probably wrong. Because like the guardrails haven't been designed that well. And so then that's kind of how you decide like what goes to human versus what an LLM can do.
Like we're building a system that can be used on like any surface, whether it's like agent or customer facing. And what we're doing now is like we have enough like customer data from interactions with a chatbot for the last like few years. So we have several scenarios where like the UX designers like are very biased and like their subject matter expertise and when they're how they're testing it, which fair enough because they're edge cases you're looking for and things you've seen in chat transcript reviews. But we are now starting to use actual interactions with customers to test the agentic workflows and see how they perform. And we're just now starting to get into that, so we'll see how it goes. But that's probably going to be our iteration and like kind of future of how we establish even guardrails and identify like what do we need to put in the wild to make sure it does what it needs to.
Nice. That makes a ton of sense. And then like, what other, like, I guess like what other verticals do you usually like think of? There's obviously the design element. Are there like, how do you combat, like, I guess like, I mean, there's bias both in answering questions when you are a chatbot, right? Like, the other day I was like talking to Claude and I was like, hey, like what's MCP, which is like a Claude product, right? It's like the Model Context Protocol. It's how it interacts with computers and stuff. And it was just like, I don't know, let me search Google for it. And because like because these models aren't updated constantly, like there's obviously like the inherent bias as to like what it knows and what it doesn't know, right? Like if you add something. Oh, wait, Sean, you were giving me the story.
Yeah. I wasn't gonna say the brand name, but
It's okay. It's okay.
so we'll cut that one out. I'll make a note of that.
We can also just ping them. You know, we can also just ping them. We'll send them the clip. Hey,
Well,
update
yeah,
your chatbot.
I'd like our sales team to hit them up without necessarily torching them onto our billions of listeners, you know. But so I signed up for. Yeah, goddamn.
Just do the kid off. Just do the kid.
All right. So I signed up for this tool through a landing page that said free video or audio transcription. So it was like upload a video file, get a text file. It was like huge because I had one specific audio file I needed transcribed. Sign up for this landing page. It takes me to just like the regular app interface, which I've used before. And I was like, oh, this isn't it. So I went re-Googled for that landing page and thought, okay, I'm an identified user. I have my account now. It'll take me to a logged in state and this page will work. Still did not work. So I chat in with their bot and I tell it what I want. And it's like, ooh, yeah, we don't do that. You'd have to like bring, a transcript and then we can put that in the product. So then I sent them a link to the landing page. And I said, your landing page explicitly says this is a feature. And they go, yeah, that's weird. We don't do that. And so it's like, okay, either you didn't give it access to that API or update that that page existed, or they deprecated that page and the chatbot's right. And the, whoever's managing the site just didn't take down the page or something. But
Yeah.
that's a brutal experience where now like I went through a whole sign up flow and was told I'm an idiot.
It's broken. And you're like, hey, tool, you're supposed to help me with this being broken. And it just didn't do it. Yeah, that's it's really funny.
And I think that's like a really common problem too, like across the board, because these LLMs like are referencing so many tools. Like you've got, RAG or like the business logic or APIs or whatever. So making sure all the different moving pieces, because they're typically owned by different groups in business. It's not just like one. So it's like, how do you make sure everyone is updating their things? Without tying them to like taking a goal against some metric so that they have ownership to it. I think maybe that will start to solve itself over time as like these systems become more like established in businesses. Because at some point everyone's got to get it, right? Like these machines are going to be broken until we do our shit right,
I mean, that's you would hope, but like think about how often you'll read like tech docs that are out of date, or you'll be reading like a blog that's like, hey, here's how to do this with our tool. And it is referencing old UI and old features. Like it does just inherently become way more complex to keep that stuff up to date as your product expands, as your team expands. And so if you don't make it part of your like pre-launch checklist starting now, you probably aren't in 6 months when it's like people three steps removed from the problem. Like this goes back to that data point that doesn't exist, right? Like they're not going to review this chat. They're just going to see somebody who signed up and then ended up not using any features and be like, oh, bummer, this person created a free account and didn't do anything. They're not going to look into that in aggregate.
And I think that even from like a responsible AI perspective, like that's what makes me nervous and what, for better or worse, like sometimes keeps me up at night thinking about the future where everyone is moving so fast. Like you have like half of businesses that are just moving fast and not even thinking about doing things in a really well-structured way that they can scale with and do things right. Because honestly, like most businesses don't want to do that. It doesn't help their bottom line. But then you've got this other side that like, it's so split. I want to say it's like 50-50 of the people that are going to do it right versus not. But I feel like it's going to be, there's probably a lot more metas in the world, and Googles. And so like it makes me really nervous because like then you're just, 5 years down the road trying to claw back and correct this like pile of crap that we've designed and built, not in individual business, but like as a society and in a business world that like is just harming people overall. Yeah,
Wait,
because
are
I feel
you
like things are really
suggesting
gonna
that Meta isn't doing everything benevolently?
weird, right?
No, she'd never say that. That's
I
absolute.
must have misheard that.
Yeah. No, they're so good.
Oh my God. Yeah. The angels of the tech world of Silicon Valley.
Love that. Love them. Anyway.
So how do you think about like, I guess like how do you, is it through like soft influence of getting other teams and departments to be on board with the fact that like we need to have these guardrails and we need to do QA and monitoring, we need to do this right from the beginning, or how do you make sure that again, if you said 50-50 are going to do it right and do it poorly, how do you make sure that your company builds to be in that right 50?
Yeah. It's funny because now like I don't own that specific program that's building out the agentic workflows, but I stay very closely tied to it because it affects the chatbot program that I'm involved in. And then I have two programs that I work on. One's issue prediction engine, that's like the brain for the agentic system, and then chatbot, which is the surface that's like the output that the users are interacting with. So I own those two pieces, and they're closely tied to the agentic workflows. And so, like to answer your question, like it's kind of, since I don't directly own it, I'm often in Slack sending messages and reminders to the team, like thoughts I've had that turn into like content that I'm sharing on LinkedIn, like I'm sharing internally too. Like I'm trying to be the evangelist, to be like nudging people, to be like, hey, let's make sure we're thinking this way, have fallback mechanisms, having guardrails, like we need confidence thresholds to make sure when the LLM does XYZ, like we're saving someone and like kicking them out and getting them to a human for support. Um, so I think it can be very overwhelming because it seems like this huge problem. So I just try to look at it in like small bite-sized pieces and what I can do and influence without being directly involved.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. Got it. And then like, how do you think about this from the business perspective as well, right? Because like there's a big reason to care, obviously, because you want to make sure. But I guess like actually no, I'm gonna ask a different question. How do you decide, right? Like the point of the whole system is to like make the human workload a little bit easier. But like how do you decide, right? Like what like how have you guys set up systems to push to a human when the AI is uncomfortable? Like do you have any sort of like insights into how that actually works?
A lot at the time being, a lot of it is still legacy systems that kind of handle that. There are just so many moving parts, and so we're kind of in a position where the agentic system is interacting, like its fallback mechanism is a legacy hard-coded like chatbot workflow kind of system, which is totally fine. And I don't know if there's ever really a point to, at some point, things will probably advance where it makes sense to deprecate that and get rid of that tech debt. But it's kind of interesting. Like I haven't gotten to a point where I don't see that system working and needing to create something unique in the AI agent. Versus like needing to have some kind of prompt or instruction to be like, hey, if you're not confident, go look at this other resource. And if you're still not confident, then like, okay, transfer to a human. And then it goes into those like old legacy systems. Does that answer your question? I feel like that didn't really answer your question.
No, I don't think that definitely did. The legacy system things makes a ton of sense actually. Are you guys are there other spots where you guys are implementing sort of like you said agentic layer there, like are there other workflows that you guys are implementing it on? Or like have you seen it for other companies that you've either talked to or work with?
I think my LinkedIn, my professional feed is full of conversational designers. And so a lot of what I see, yeah, so they have a lot of them are either like voice UI, like the Ray-Ban Meta sunglasses is another like product that's using like agentic um, workflows. Customer experience is a really common one. Um, yeah, it's nothing really like novel that I've seen so far, like in a conversation design perspective. I know startups are doing really cool things um, where it's more engineering focused, but I feel like it's just like the traditional things that we were using chatbots for before are what people are starting to like convert over to these agentic workflows.
Got it. Got it. I'm pulling up the notes from our previous conversation. You also talked about some of like the data challenges. You said that you've done some consulting work in the past, and a lot of the time that a lot of things that Sean and I spend our time talking about, and we actually had a really good chat on Monday about this, is the fact that like giving AI context to the right data at the right time, the right kind of data, is tough. Kate, I guess how have you seen people work around this, and what does the future look like there?
Yeah, it's I have not seen a business that does not have challenges with this, to be honest, unless they are like starting up from scratch and can build things the way it needs to be built for an LLM. It's one thing, but companies that have existed, like I see them all having the same problems. Either the data is not in one single source of truth; it's just spread out everywhere. It's not real time. That's a big issue. Like if you need real time data to solve issues, then like that's a hard, like requirement because otherwise you're not really solving the customer's issue that they're contacting about. But I think like siloed data and even um, not understanding how the data overlaps. Like when you think of like predictive signals to be proactive in solving someone's issue, you can have a base of like 300 signals and you might like 50% of those might just be like symptoms of a root cause, and you need to like cluster those and like find out like what is actually going on underneath the surface that's going to help this user complete whatever tasks they're wanting to do, for example. And I think you need tech to help you with that as well, because in most businesses that are especially large ones, like that knowledge is probably tribal if it exists at all, and what the actual root cause is and how your data overlaps.
And how much of this is surfacing data to the chatbot versus how much of it is like, look, like the chatbot is never going to be good at this, so we're going to like give the human as much information to be able to solve the problem efficiently when they inevitably get like looped in.
Well, I think at the end of the day, like these systems, like they can eventually get good enough where you take the human out of the loop, and the human is only like a human agent, for example, like is just dealing with the most complex issues that an LLM might struggle with the most or just can't solve. But at the end of the day, because it's not even, you can have this underlying system and it can be serving a chatbot, it can be following users around and then, have a modal pop up that appears when certain signals trigger to like save them from churning. Like it's not just chatbots, like these underlying systems can be placed anywhere. As long as you have a trigger and a UI, you can do whatever you want.
That was like 2 minutes of just absolute like, I don't know. I got that could be the whole episode. That was awesome. Yeah, I mean, so I think there were so many points in there where I had follow-up questions. And then one of them I think is, you're exactly right about is the difference in, or understanding how real-time data needs to be for any given use case, right? Because you don't need real-time data for all things. but there are very particular things that like a 3-hour lag is disastrous for. And so I think a lot of people have gotten, myself included, when I've asked engineers and product teams for like what I want in a system before, just kind of like, I don't know, like data freshness every 12 hours sounds reasonable. And this is kind of like a napkin thing. I think we're getting to a point where these systems you need to really be thoughtful about the data that will be used and how real time it needs to be versus how composite it can be and how much time you have to stitch data together from a bunch of different sources and to do a bunch of operations before you feed it somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, like, and I'm working in like a regulatory space, but you think about even like healthcare, like it's really important, because, you're dealing with people's health and people's money. Like those are really serious things to people, and like someone might be really upset that they can't access like that's amount of money that seems really small to you, but like that's a lot to them, you know? And so that real time access, and then it all comes back to trust, and like the responsible AI bit, like, if you can't surface that real time data, like you're eroding the trust of your users, and they're going to freak out and probably go to your competitor.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about that. Yeah, like I'd always thought about it because I came from a fintech before I moved over here, and so we took that kind of trust and responsibility very, very seriously because it's people's money. You don't get second chances. It's not okay to make errors. And so I thought about it from that perspective. For a lot of other companies, I hadn't really thought about almost like how much friction there is to switch to a competitor, right? Like to our point of the example I gave earlier about the terrible chatbot thing that gave me the wrong answer. I instantly went and found a different tool that did that. I'm probably done using that tool. Like you didn't do what I wanted when I needed you. You got it wrong. Someone else solved it. They get my business. So it is interesting to think about what is the switching cost and how that factors in as well. Where the easier it is to sign up for you, great, but the easier it is to sign up with your competitors, also something you should consider in terms of like, these are can't fail moments.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I think most businesses would care about that because at the end of the day, like it's trust. So it's a good selling point to having responsible AI baked in from the very beginning,
Yeah, I guess like I wonder if like maybe that's like one of the metrics you start to look at is like negative interaction, and then like what is the correlation to churn or something like that, and be able to say like, hey, okay, every time we have a bad chat interaction or a bad whatever interaction, the likelihood this person leaves is 1 in 8, 1 in 12, whatever it is. Like it's a non-insignificant number. You can put a dollar amount to that, and that starts to get attention.
Yeah. 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 Because at the end of the day, like if you're doing this within a business, like you need something to get your stakeholders and leadership to care. So tying it to revenue is a powerful way to do that.
I think that is a great place to end. Sarah, thank you so much for coming on. And before we finish, where can our listeners find you? Where can they read more of your wise words, listen to more of your wise words?
Yeah,
I know you said you're going to be at a conference in October.
Maybe. I applied. I don't know if I'll be going yet. I applied last night to speak at a conference, at a Agentic conference, but we'll see what happens with that. But people can find me on LinkedIn. I post content about responsible AI and building agentic systems on there pretty regularly, and post on Medium a little bit, but most everything's on LinkedIn.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah. No, you guys are great. And I've done so many of these in the past, more like, it was like conversation design focused like 2 years ago, and then starting to get back into the space. And some people are just like very dry. So, yeah.
I'm glad we're not dry.
You guys have good energy. You guys have good energy.
Thanks.
Appreciate
it. Well, everyone, go find more of Sarah's work on LinkedIn. And thanks again for coming on.